Welcome back to the McCann Dogs podcast. This is episode 31, and we're excited to be this deep into our podcast. I'm joined today by the Director of Online Training for the My Dog Can program, Shannon Viljasso, and thanks for joining us again today, Shannon.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
We have an interesting topic to talk about today, and this is a really popular one with a lot of our puppy head start students, and it's a really common one that we get asked questions about, and that's about creating bite inhibition or getting your dog to stop nipping. And today we're going to dive into the why behind why dogs may nip or bite and how to fix that problem. I'm Ken Steep, and welcome back to McCann Dogs. Now, Shannon, this is such a popular topic, and it's something that people often, really struggle with, it seems. And I think we've got some really good ways to address the issue, as well as, helping people understand why their dog may be biting them. And I'd love to jump right into that today.
Yeah, it can be quite the force to reckon with. We think about this Disney model of puppies and these cute, fuzzy, wonderful puppies that are just going to bring nothing but joy to our lives. And then, of course, the reality is there's lots and lots of joy, but there's lots of everything, because this is a creature with wants and needs and has done some learning all on its own and with its litter mates. So they will often come with a lot of biting behaviors, and that's puppy nipping stuff. It's very normal, very natural thing. If you've just brought home your first puppy and you're wondering if your dog is if there's something wrong with them because they're biting so much, or because there's slices all over your hands and your arms from those little needle teeth, rest assured you have a normal puppy. We can definitely help you work through this. It's just a matter of finding some consistent ways of helping them understand that their teeth, while it might have been okay to play with their teeth with their litter mates and with other dog friends, with humans, their teeth need to not touch human skin. So there's lots of different ways that we can help them understand that.
For sure. And the reality is that there's only a couple of reasons why your puppy might put their teeth on you. And let's talk about those reasons. I think I read your blog post, and for our podcast listeners, I will definitely link the Shannon's blog post in the show notes below. I would highly suggest that you add the McCann Dogs blog to your RSS feed, because there's so much great information on there, and Shannon is often updating the blog with something really interesting, and lots of things that will apply directly to your dog training scenario. But in the blog post, you mentioned that the two reasons are the first one would be that they meant to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of myths and fallacies out there that say, oh, it was an accident. People will jump to that conclusion. Oh, he didn't mean to, when they've got a little scrape on them from their puppy teeth, or perhaps a bigger scrape from puppy teeth. Definitely, they meant to. They are playing with their teeth because that's the way they've learned to play with their litter mates. They'll jostle, they'll play with each other. They can play really, really rough. And of all of the puppies that I've had some that have been very gentle with their mouths from the beginning. Ned comes to mind right away. I had almost no nipping issues with him. It was a saving grace. It was wonderful. With some of my other puppies, though, there's been a lot of very extreme nipping right from the get-go with those little needle teeth, and it's just been some consistent work to get them through that. So know that if they're doing it, they're doing it because they mean to, and that's not to say that they're awful dogs. It just means that they haven't been taught not to, which is the next point that I made. It's really important that we remember that we are not dogs, and dogs don't think like humans. So we need to start understanding life from their perspective. And that means that we need to teach them the things that are important to us. They don't necessarily have any idea that it hurts. They can't conceptualize and understand that it hurts us when they bite with those little needle teeth. So we need to have ways of convincing them that it should be their responsibility to be careful, and whatever they're doing, they always need to be responsible for their own teeth. And there's lots of great ways that we can teach those things.
For sure. I know, having whelped a couple of litters and, been around puppies my whole life, it's a social interaction for them, especially when they're really, really little. That's how they engage and interact and play. And there's certainly a different understanding from them. So I think that's a really important point that, people don't think that it's accidental when your puppy puts their teeth on you. And when you mentioned that they haven't been taught to be careful as your next point, let's discuss that a little bit. We know we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can teach your puppy to be careful, but most often people, when they first experience this behavior, it's because their puppy doesn't know any better.
Exactly, absolutely. And there can be different tendencies with different breeds or different group breeds of dogs, that sort of thing. For example, if you have a German Shepherd, those dogs are bred to be much more physical with their mouths. So you're going to get a more powerful tug from that dog. You're going to probably get some worse puppy nipping from that sort of dog, maybe a Rottweiler or a Malinois, those working breeds that are really bred to have strong bites. If you're looking at sporting breeds, for example, they are bred to be very tactile with their mouths, but they're also bred to be very gentle with their mouths. So, for example, with a Golden Retriever, you might get lots of puppy nipping. I mean, every puppy is an individual, but they might be a little bit softer with their bite inhibition already. So first off, you're going to be dealing with different levels of puppy nipping and different intensities of puppy nipping as well. So know that that's probably going to be a normal thing. And again, it's just our job to get in there and give them the right information that says you're okay to use your teeth when you're dealing with a toy. You're okay to use your teeth when you're dealing with another puppy and play biting, but you're not okay to use those teeth when it comes to humans.
Now, you would have firsthand experience with some of the bigger breeds. I know that the puppy that brought you to McCann Professional Dog Trainers was a Rottweiler. And what was your experience with him as a puppy?
That she was, that was a very big learning experience for me. I really didn't know a whole lot about dogs at that point, and I was desperate for help, and that's when I found McCann Dog Trainers. And once I got the right information into her, Quincy was an absolute joy for the entirety of her life. But I can tell you for a fact, this was many, many years ago, so she was still a family dog. I was still living at home with my parents, and my mother to this day still has marks on her arms from that puppy nipping stuff. Yeah, from Quincy as, the 9-week-old puppy. It was a little alligator there. So definitely lots of experience with it there, but with the right information, we got her over it very quickly. So it was only a nightmare for a few weeks until we were able to get into classes here at McCann's.
Right. So let's talk about some of the ways that we're going to start, dealing with this issue, some of the things that we can start to teach our puppy so that they have a better understanding of when they can use their teeth and how to use their teeth in their interaction with us.
Yeah, definitely. I like to use the things that I have at my disposal to help my puppy understand. So a couple of those things. One of them is food. Food is a big one that you can use to help your dog understand how to control their mouths. And toys as well are another thing that are really, really helpful in teaching these things. The biggest, the sort of umbrella and the overshadow of everything, though, is consistency and making sure that anytime you are interacting with your puppy at all and you feel teeth, making sure that at that point you let them know it's not acceptable. So whether that is calmly ending the game, whether that is using your leash and taking control of them to stop that fun of, jumping at you and nipping. As a side note, you've probably heard on our podcasts before that we almost always have leashes on our puppies. The second they come out of their crate or anytime they're loose in the house, we make sure that they've got a leash or a long line dragging so that you can take control, because that gives you the upper hand, right? Puppies are really fast. You don't want to end up in a situation where you're trying to chase them and catch them. You don't want them to have fun playing that catch me if you can game. So having that leash or long line dragging just allows you to reach in calmly and step on it and stop them from playing those little puppy hijinks games that can get you into a little bit of mischief. So first and foremost, consistency is absolutely the most important thing. And that means anytime you feel teeth, you need to have some sort of a reaction so that your puppy says, oh, okay, I remember that message. I got that one before.
Yeah, I love that idea. We recently published, or you and I published a video a little while ago talking about your dog having a little bit of emotional control when it comes to food and feeding. We recently published a video talking about how to teach your dog to not nip at your fingers when you're feeding them some food. And I'll as resources for our podcast audience, I'll link those in the show notes below. But that process can be taught so quickly, because especially with something like food, it's such a valuable resource to your puppy that they're willing to problem solve. They're willing to think through the process of how do I get this? How do I get this thing? How do I get this food? As you practice some of these skills and you do these exercises with your puppy, and it's not a challenging process for to work with your puppy to get them to want to keep their teeth off you, or at least be mindful or more gentle when they're taking that food from you.
Yeah, and a lot of the times it's just taking that fun element out of the situation. But with the food, that's a really great way of helping your dog understand that nipping your fingers is not an option. So basically what we would do, and this is a really simple setup. We've got videos with this, so you'll see that in the link that Ken's going to put in. But what you would want to do is just pinch some food in your fingers. I'm not sure if you can see this here, just between your fingers, and offer that to the puppy. And if you feel teeth at all you're going to do is a little oops or a little pull it away, and then offer it back to them again within a couple of seconds. And same thing, you're going to just repeat the same process until they start gently trying to get that food. So now if they're sniffing and maybe licking a little bit, you might say yes or click, and then open your hand and let them have that treat. So the key is they never get the food if they're using their teeth on your fingers, and they get a very clear message that the food is actually removed from the situation if they are not gentle, so if they're rough at all. And consistently working through that, and that means, anytime you're working with your puppy, if you're working on a food lure and they're following food and you feel that those teeth on your fingers, a little oops or hey, pull it away, try again. Ideally, they'll work through this separately so that your dog doesn't get confused with the exercises that you're working with them as well. So one of the first things I work on when my puppies come home is teaching them how to take food gently and starting that good work with bite inhibition, starting to instill that responsibility with their teeth, that it's their responsibility to be careful.
And anyone who owns a puppy knows that as you put the work in, sometimes it can be stressful and challenging to train that puppy to do certain skills, response to name, or walk on a loose leash, or come when called, or whatever the thing is. And you don't want to have the added frustration of having a puppy who's going to nip you when you're about to reward them. It's really nice to have you to enjoy the time that you're working with your puppy as well. It's so important to be able to have good timing with your rewards, and you want to be confident that when you reach out to reward your puppy for a job well done, that you're going to bring your hand back with all of your fingers on it. I mean, it's just so important. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that when you're working on some of these exercises, if your puppy loves chicken, or if your puppy loves whatever, liver treats, then maybe you wouldn't use chicken or liver treats when you're teaching this specific exercise, because we really want to set our dogs up to be right. And it's helpful in this situation if I were to use something like kibble, or something that your puppy finds is a little bit lower value to help them to be successful during this exercise.
Yeah, definitely. And as an extra tip on top of that, save the really, really high value rewards for your really, really high value exercises. So for example, as Ken was saying, don't use chicken in just teaching bite inhibition. Your dog's going to show interest in that food anyways, most likely. If not, then you can maybe get them something a little bit more interesting. But most dogs are food motivated enough that if you're just using kibble or something that's a really low value reward, you can get that message across still with that lower value reward, and save the high value rewards for making an impact on things like response to name and recall.
Yeah, and another method to help teach your puppy good bite inhibition is the game of tug. Now, I love the game of tug. I grew up in a household, that didn't believe tug was good for your dog. So when I was introduced to the idea at McCann Professional Dog Trainers that, it was a great way to build a relationship, I was a little skeptical at first. However, after working through the exercises, understanding how my dog could have, fun with me and that toy at the same time, and build value on me while playing with that toy, it was such an important. It was one of those light bulb moments where you truly understand how the dogs learn. But let's talk about using tug as a way to teach your dog bite inhibition.
Yeah, definitely. Another one of my favorite ways to work on that bite inhibition exercise, for sure. And initially, I will have a toy that my dog has a much better chance of being successful with, because I want them to enjoy the game of tug. I don't want to be interrupting it a million times, but I also want to make sure that I get in this lesson as well. So I'll have a good sized toy initially with a puppy. So there's lots of areas for them on the toy to bite without necessarily having to interact with my fingers. But there's a fly flying around me. Again, the idea is that the dog learns it's their responsibility to be careful with their teeth. I might have to go get a floss
Yeah,
water.
yeah. Poor Shannon. I know our podcast audience can't see this, but I've seen it. It looked gigantic because it flew up near the camera on her computer. But Shannon's being attacked by flies as she tries to teach us here. I totally agree. I love the game of tug when playing with the dog, and I think that's one thing people maybe struggle with is the idea of an interactive toy versus a chew toy. Really understanding what's a great toy to use with my puppy for the game of tug.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a really great point to make. So, for safety's sake, we have what we call interactive toys and chew toys. And chew toys would be something that are safe, something that is safe to leave with your dog unattended. So, with my own dogs, usually the only things I'll ever leave with them unattended are Kongs or nylon bones. And every dog's going to be a little bit different. There's so much information on all of these toys out there on our website, on our blog. We've talked extensively about all these things in our chewing videos and whatnot. So, you can certainly find some toys that are safe and right for you. But with interactive toys, those are toys that you would never, ever leave with your dog. You know, the rope toys, for example, where they can take little pieces of the thread and potentially cause a blockage or cause some damage. They can tear those apart and even just destroy the toys. That's definitely not as big an issue as actually ingesting something and causing a veterinary visit. But we do want to make sure it's that the dog can grip and hold on to. So usually when they're baby puppies, something nice and soft. So a plush toy, like a long plush bone or something of that nature would be great. And again, that gives your dog lots of area to grab on and tug. Now, what I like to do with my young puppies as I'm working is I will move my hands around on the toy, and I don't set them up to lack in success. I set them up so that we can get these lessons in. So basically, I'll make it really obvious first off where my hands are. So I'm not just sliding my hand in as my puppy's tugging and they're kind of lost in the moment and I'm sneaking up on them. But as I'm working with my puppy and I'm about to say get it, I make sure my hands are very visible, but I'll move them in closer to the center of the toy. I'll give them permission to get the toy with whatever my cue happens to be. Get it is usually the case. And as he goes to bite, if he bites the right place, I'm going to engage with him. I'm going to play. I'm going to, make a big deal out of having this fun game with the puppy. If he goes to engage with the toy and he hits my fingers, right away the game ends. Basically before it starts, it ends at that point. He needs to know that it's his responsibility to be careful with those teeth. So I'm not going to continue the game and hope that he removes his teeth from me. I'm not going to say, ouch, and just move my hand out of his mouth. I am going to say, nope, you don't get to play. You weren't careful with your teeth. You don't get to play the game. I'll wait a few seconds. I'll get him, sitting, calm down for a moment. And these are all things that I've worked before introducing the tug so that my dog knows how to do these things. And then I'll invite it again. And I might move my hands a little bit depending on how hard of a time he had. Again, I don't want to set him up for failure, but I do want to get my message across. So I'm going to find a happy medium there to help him understand. And then as he gets better at that, so say I've gone, 3 sessions with tug and I haven't felt any teeth on my fingers whatsoever. At that point, as I'm tugging, I'll start to move my hands around a little bit. I might start to pet the side of his face. I'll start to interact with him. A lot of times with puppies, that'll make them want to interact with that play biting behavior and back at you. So if at that point I feel teeth at all, I immediately end the game. If he's being careful with his teeth, if he's very conscious of the idea that my hands are there and he's trying not to interact with them with his mouth, I'm going to make sure at that point that the game continues. We have the best time. And then I can practice my out, my sit, my get it. And I can just keep working with that as I move my hands around on the toy and as I give him the opportunity to make those good decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that everyone in the family, everyone in the household, whether it's a spouse or a partner or whatever, that everyone's on the same page when it comes to playing the rules when playing tug or the rules when feeding by hand. I think it's really speeds up the learning process for your puppy, and it doesn't allow for any confusion.
Yeah, most definitely. There's some things in the household that you can be a little bit more lax on when it comes to certain rules. If there's one person that we've talked about before, if there's one person that really wants the dog to jump up on them and another person that doesn't, you can teach that by teaching your dog a specific cue, teaching them to jump up on cue rather than just make the decision themselves. But there's really, unless you're into very high-end bite work or Schutzhund work, there are very few situations where you would ever want your dog thinking it's okay to use their teeth. So Be consistent with that. Make sure all of the members of the household are on board with that. And with kids, it can be a little bit more tricky. With kids, we don't want them to actually be the ones that are taking control of the dog. A lot of the times that just works so much against you, depending on the age of the child. What we like to do with kids is always have an adult there, ready, supervising, and actually teaching the child what it is they want them to do with the dog. Remember that you're training the dog, but you're also training the child at the same time. So we want to make sure that they get consistent and good information, and leaving them unsupervised means that you have no control over that, whether it's with the puppy and the child, or whether it is just with the puppy or with the child by themselves. We want to make sure that there's good, consistent rules and feedback. And if you're absent from the equation, there's no way that's going to happen.
Yeah, let's talk about for a moment about the difference between puppy nipping and biting and an adult dog nipping and biting. Maybe you've gotten a rehome dog or a rescue dog, and they have this same struggle with bite inhibition. The way we approach this is going to be different than the way we would with a 8, 9, 10-week-old puppy.
Definitely. And you might it can be a hard situation, because identifying whether or not this is a dog that is biting because there's other things going on, or they're and not biting but mouthing and biting with their mouths. If they are doing that just because they've never learned not to. And there's lots of adult dogs that will play with their mouths because they don't understand that they shouldn't. So you might seek the advice of a behaviorist to find out which is happening. If there's any confusion on your part whatsoever about why it's happening, or you're just not sure about what's going on, seek the advice of a behaviorist. Get some feedback about what it is that's happening, because you're going to deal with it very different ways. If it's actually a serious biting issue, it's something completely different from any of the things that we just talked about. We're talking about, very innocent puppy play biting behavior. We're definitely not talking about serious biting behavior. So if it's an adult dog and it's just the same goofy puppy behavior that you're getting just because it's a 13-month-old puppy instead of an 8-week-old puppy, you might still get some of those behaviors, but you definitely want to make sure you deal with them. Leaving those things can end up causing you all sorts of grief in the future. So we want to make sure that every dog, regardless of their age, knows how to appropriately use their mouths, and that human skin is a very, very delicate thing. So if it's an adult dog or an older puppy, if you will, just make sure that you know what you're looking at. Don't assume that it's puppy nipping if you're concerned that it's anything but. Seek some behavioral advice and get a good training program set up so you can work through that.
Yeah, I love that idea, and identifying that training is needed is really, really important there. Now, we get all different ages of dogs in our My Dog Can program, and I'd like if we could just talk very briefly about what the My Dog Can program is for maybe one of our podcast listeners who would find it appropriate for their training situation and their dog.
Absolutely. My Dog Ken is our grade 1 program adapted for an online environment. So there's that fly again. We spent a good 2 years putting this program together because we wanted to make sure that it represented what we do here at McCann's. And, we've spent almost 38 years now training family dogs to have good manners and doing it with as much quality as we can possibly put into the program. We absolutely love what we do. And we didn't want to put something online that was just a bunch of videos for people to watch. We wanted to make sure that we had a program that was comprehensive, and just like our grade 1 program could take a dog who had never had a minute of obedience training and get them to a point in a few short weeks where they're a joy to live with. They walk nicely on leash. They come when they're called, regardless of what distractions are out there. And we also teach them to have emotional control through stay exercises. We work on greeting manners. We work on all sorts of things that are so important to having a well-behaved dog. There's lots of support with this program. You can call our office at any point. All the people that answer the phones are professional dog trainers around here. You can email us. We've got a great Facebook group that's dedicated to just our My Dog Ken students. And we talk about so much in that group. We really teach people the why behind dog training and how to think and sort of figure out what their dogs are looking for or needing, and how to adapt their life into a situation where they can troubleshoot down the road. And they really start to understand dog training on a more conceptual level than just, or 1 + 1 = 2 sort of thing when you're teaching skills. So it's a fantastic program, and you can try it for free. If you go to our website, you can have a look for yourself, see if you think it's going to be the right fit for you. It's a really, really great program.
And it's so nice to be able to have access to a professional dog trainer. If you have an issue anywhere along the line, you can reach out to Shannon or myself or any of our professional trainers in our office. And, it's peace of mind, as well as having access to the community. I mean, our community is so great. It's so much fun to watch people, celebrate their successes and talk about, the new experiences that they've had with their dog, because, they have a dog who listens. They have a dog who behaves when they're in a busy public setting or whatever the case is. So I'll post a link for the My Dog Can program in the show notes below, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already. Well, I want to thank you guys for listening. I enjoy this topic. Because I've lived through it. I've experienced this as a student as well as as helping people with it as an instructor. And I think this is a really important one that a lot of people can get a lot of value from. So I want to thank our podcast audience for listening to another episode of the McCann Dogs podcast. And Shannon, of course, as always, I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise.
Oh, my pleasure. It was great.
Now, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, or if this is your first time seeing us on our YouTube video podcast channel, which we have just created, make sure you follow our podcast or hit that subscribe button on our channel. And on that note, I'm Ken, and I want to wish you guys happy training. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.